Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found on the list of study groups on the L&L Research website. We can also be found on Facebook here if you just search for Seattle Law of One study group. We meet on Zoom every Tuesday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. PST. You don't have to live in Seattle or the Seattle area to join, as long as you're available to join us online from wherever you're at. We would love to have you anytime. And today we are blessed again to have Jim McCarty joining us for some informal conversation and some questions and answers. How are you doing today, Jim?
Doing well. It's a beautiful spring day here. Enjoying that for sure.
Oh, yes. Yes, the weather has been warming up a fair bit in Kentucky, huh?
It's been going back and forth. We're getting a little cold, a little warm.
That's what we're getting in Seattle too, although a little bit more on the colder side than the warmer side, I think. Well, great to see you and appreciate your joining us today. I did note that we did have the global Gaia meditations again this morning for world peace in Ukraine, and our heartfelt thanks to L&L Research and folks there for keeping that going. I did want to ask that about that for starters, only because I might have asked about this before and I honestly don't remember. But in terms of the Gaia meditations, from your experience, how much does it matter on a metaphysical level whether people are meditating for world peace or meditating for Gaia, like at that same time of day from wherever they're at?
I actually don't know. I don't think it makes a great difference. That's my opinion, as long as your intention is to meditate for peace, because I think it creates a kind of an energy that is palpable on the spiritual level. And whenever you meditate, I think you add to that energy. But I also think that when we all meditate together, the more that meditate together, that the energy is somehow doubled or increased. So I think you can always help. There's no way you cannot help.
Indeed, yeah. May I ask, when you do the meditations for, I think it's about 11 minutes, do you use the same meditations that you've shared in the videos that I think you've shared, or do you sit in silence, or do you speak out loud, or does your mind go into monkey mind mode and start thinking about gardening and stuff while you're doing it?
Well, what I attempt to do is to offer prayers that would be of assistance to everyone everywhere, especially those in the Ukraine and in Russia, and to try to image peace beginning within each soul, because I think that the real key to world peace comes from each of us that has a peace within us. And then we can share that and ask that be expanded and magnified and give it to everyone on the planet. There are wars in other places as well. People have the inner wars that they're always, dealing with it one way or another, with yourself or with companions or with society or with one segment or another. So if we can resolve those inner wars, I think that's a great way to begin the meditation and to try to come from a place of peace.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes total sense. Appreciate your sharing that. Did want to encourage folks who are on the Zoom call right now, if you have any follow-up questions or anything you wanted to ask about when Jim is speaking, feel free to put them in the chat window, and I will be keeping an eye on there for sure. Otherwise, Jim, I did want to ask one other question. I have been reading your Camelot Journal entries, as I always do every day, and I cannot recommend them enough for students of the Law of One. They are on the L&L Research website, and I think if you go to the Connect link at top and click on the Bring Forth Forum, that'll take you to a page where you can find Jim's Camelot Journal entries there. And yeah, such a beautiful treasure full of love and light and wisdom, as your reflections on Ra's teachings from 40 plus years ago, and now with the benefit of hindsight, and so many beautiful lessons there. And I noticed for the last week or so, you've been writing about sexual energy transfers and energy transfers in general. And without invading your privacy too much, I was wondering, I mean, the relationship you had with Carla, so special, something I would imagine all of us would aspire to and hope to be able to have that kind of relationship and energy transfer in this incarnation. And if not in this one, maybe in future ones. For those who have not been reading your entries from the last few days, can you share a little bit about the nature of sexual energy transfers? Maybe how you work them with Carla, or about energy transfers in general, as those who are here or those who are watching, listening might learn and apply in our own lives?
Well, in general, a sexual energy transfer happens when you reach the green ray, the heart chakra. When you open the heart to unconditional love, then it's possible to transfer energy. It's not possible if the heart's not open. So it took a while for Carla and me to discover that if we did have a sexual energy transfer the night before a raw session, that the raw session was much longer. And after we figured that out after session 16, which was 52 questions long, the longest ever. And the way that it seems to work is that the male has the ability to store and transfer physical energy, which the female is less vital in. The female has the ability to transfer emotional and spiritual energy, which the male is less vital in. So Carla, having low physical energy for most of her life, because that was the way she incarnated, she had that for a reason, was much benefited by that type of transfer. So at the time that we were having the sexual intercourse before the sessions, we did not know about sexual energy transfers until we started asking about them. So besides increasing the physical energy, the vital energy that is necessary for the raw contact, the energy of the mind, the body, and the spirit together was also enhanced. So that vital energy, Ra said, strengthened the shuttle, or the channel through which Ra spoke and gave us the information in answer to Don's questions. So we discovered also that if we dedicated the sexual energy exchange to the one infinite creator, that the amount of energy was also increased. And if we both had an orgasm at the same time, the energy was doubled. So those are things we discovered about how this worked. And Ra was able to give us this kind of information because when they were in the third density on Venus, they were a much less bellicose type of a culture than we are here. They were working consciously with these concepts of how sexual energy transfers could occur and how they are more efficient if they're with a mated pair. It's not necessary all the time for it to be a mate, but it works better if it is somebody that you have a harmony with and a clear communication with, that you've worked with over a period of time so that you become as one being. And that's all what we're trying to do here. You know, in this third density, we're trying to form a social memory complex and get into the fourth density and keep on going. This is all a type of blending our energies together that we're undergoing in our spiritual path. And this sexual energy transfers is a specific portion of the spiritual journey. And Ross suggested from their experience on Venus, it could also be a type of technique of discovering the creator within you, that it is a way of creating what Ra called an honestation to the creator, seeking and finding what Ra also called the creator intelligent infinity. So that was another term for the creator. So they call that high sexual magic. Now, Carl and I never got into that. We weren't that disciplined and didn't know really how to do it, but we did what we could do. And apparently it helped out the raw contact a great deal. And at some point, I believe it was in session 68, Ross suggested that because of Carla's low physical energy, it would be a good idea if we did not have a session, if we did not have sexual energy transfer before the session. So from about 68 on, we always had them. We didn't always do that before that because we didn't always know just exactly what we were doing and how to do it best.
That is so fascinating. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And not coincidental, I guess, that the planet Venus is associated with the goddess of love in Greek mythology, and the planet Mars associated with the god of war as well, interestingly enough. I know you mentioned in the one or two of the journal entries about during sexual energy transfers, activation of the heart chakra or the blue ray energy center or the indigo ray center. And was that something that you were able to experience over those various times?
Well, I assume that is. Ra gave us some general guidelines as to how we could tell which level of energy had been transferred. They also, though, were a little bit shy of information when they got to the indigo and violet, because they did not wish to infringe upon the free will of the adept. And we were thinking that it was not just our free will that they were not wanting to infringe upon, but any adept who might want to continue in discovering where they were in their own journey. So we didn't get a lot of information as to just exactly how you tell if you were in indigo or violet. Carla had orgasms that lasted probably for 15 or so minutes. So I had a hunch that she was up there somewhere. And when I had orgasms, I also had them in my forehead at the indigo ray. So I think that was very likely, and we could have been in the violet too. Don't know for sure.
Wow. That's so beautiful. And that is so special. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Could go on and talk about that for another hour, but I do see quite a few questions in the chat window, and I would love to go ahead and get to those. I see Ragnar posted a question at the top of the page. Ragnar, would you like to unmute your mic? And
yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Hello, Jim. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Let me preface this. One of my favorite things about the raw material is the variety of topics that Don Elkins would touch on with Ra. Even though Ra generally tried to keep the focus on the philosophy of the Law of One, Don would still follow his curiosity into questions about like dinosaurs and Bigfoots and all kinds of stuff, And I felt with Don at the helm, we got a really great balance of profound spiritual insight and fun revelations that kept the atmosphere relatable, So I'm reading the conscious channeling library now, and it seems apparent that while Ra was more reserved, Quo is pretty chatty. They'll slap a disclaimer on it and go to town. So I find myself wishing we had Don back, because it doesn't seem like we are allowing ourselves to indulge our curiosity quite as much as he did. Not saying to start asking Quo like stupid stuff like where Jimmy Hoff was buried or whatever, but I think it could be good to continue to let that inner light of innate human curiosity and wonder shine out, and not be shy about asking Quo some more fun, lighthearted stuff from time to time, like Don would do. And just wondering what your thoughts might be on that, sir.
Well, fun and lighthearted, I think, is perfectly fine because, laughter is a very healing type of energy to engage in. However, with the raw contact, and I believe it's true also with Quo or any positively oriented entities, if we ask too many questions that aren't of a spiritual nature and don't have the evolution of mind, body, and spirit at their heart, then in the raw contact, we risk losing the raw contact. As they said, they were offering what they called a narrow band contact. And that to them meant that they needed to give us spiritual information that was good now and 10,000 years from now or forever, principles that would endure, that could help anybody to grow. Now, they did allow a certain amount of what you say, these questions about Bigfoot and cattle mutilations, things like that Don had been investigating for 25 years before he ever got into the raw contact. But they would probably say something about this is not important information. And that was a clue that we shouldn't go too far with that. We shouldn't get so interested in that we are moving away from our spiritual journey. But they, as you noted, allowed us to get some information like that, which is interesting. So that's basically my thought on that. How does it sound to you?
I think it's interesting because even though, we're risking losing the contact, I thought it was almost profound in a way that he pushed that envelope anyway. And that does speak to his, innate human curiosity. And I mean, there's something there, I think.
There was actually, even in cattle mutilations, we discovered spiritual principles there, that there was always same parts taken out of the cattle each time, and that this was meant to affect the human subconscious, but it was meant to affect it in a negative way, to cause it fear. And these entities that were kind of partaking in this cattle mutilation were of Orion orientation and working for the negatively oriented entities to cause this kind of fear, because one of the things that negative entities like is to be able to control people, and control many times is done through the concept of fear. So we did discover that, which was helpful to know. But once we had discovered that, then Don just thought, well, we've gone far enough there. Ra also had another way of letting us know whether our line of questioning was within their narrow band. And at the end of the sessions, they would say something along the lines of the alignment of the accoutrements. And that was the Bible, the incense, the candle, and the chalice that was of water that was at the head of Carla. Those were things that helped Carla gain the trance state. So they would talk about them being in alignment or slightly out of alignment. And after a while, we discovered that they weren't talking about how those physical objects were aligned, because we're 2/10 of a degree out of alignment. You can't correct that physically. So we discovered that they were giving us a code, that our line of questioning was slightly off. And they gave us a code because they wouldn't want to say, they wanted to keep our free will first and foremost. That was the priority of the raw contact. So they gave us a little code that we could figure out, that we finally did. So when we got that notation that, well, the alignment was, of the accoutrements was off a little bit, we took a look at the question, said, well, let's see, where did we get off the track here? So that was just another way of them letting us know that we needed to stay in the spiritual realm and try to discover how to accelerate our mind, body, and spirit evolution.
That is fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. May I ask, like, roughly whereabouts that was in the sessions that you discovered that was how they were communicating?
I think the very first place I saw that was somewhere around session 8. And then I think session 15, it was more obvious.
Wow.
And then after that, there were a few times that they mentioned the alignment was not quite right.
Oh, the student is perceptive. Thank you for sharing that. I see another question in the chat window from Ellie. Ellie, would you like to unmute your mic and ask your question? Ellie, are you there? There is a button in the lower left-hand corner of the screen that would allow you to unmute your mic if it is muted. Let's see. Ellie, I think we will come back to you, but I do see you are here, and it does look like your mic is muted. So you would have to go to the lower left-hand corner of your screen, move your cursor there until you see the little icons at the bottom that say mute, and you can unmute your mic. And if you don't mind, Ellie, I will come back to you and go to Josh. Josh, I see you have a number of excellent questions as always. Thank you so much for being here and bringing questions. If you don't mind, I'll ask you to ask your first question first, and then maybe we can double back after we go through the rest.
Sure. Thank you for, I don't think they're excellent, but it was all I had, so I figured I'd paste it close to you. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good. Well, how are you all?
Great. Doing well. Glad to see you. Yeah, so I guess, so these were originally questions came up after our reading sessions. We have a group. And mainly we were thinking to send them in to ask the quo, but never did. Figure I'd ask you your thoughts. The first one I had was, what happens when a person in third density becomes self-realized and merges with the creator? Does that mean they're going to eighth density, like the next octave, they've fully merged with the creator from being self-realized? Or that means they're going to fourth density and they're self-harvesting?
Well, after they leave their body in this density, they will very likely go to the fourth density. But people who have that experience of the union with the one creator almost always, in the positive sense, come back and want to share their feelings, their thoughts, the joy, the whole experience. It makes them want to teach and to help others do the same thing. Negatively oriented entities harvest themselves right away and take off for the fourth density because they're only in it for themselves. So positive entities come back and become teachers. You probably know, a lot of teachers you read are probably very much self-realized.
Thank you.
Did you have any follow-up questions to that, Josh?
No. Makes sense. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Did also want to put in a plug for Josh's group. The Reading the Law of One study group meets on Zoom also on Wednesdays, I believe. You want to give us give our viewers a plug on that, Josh? It's a great group.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, we have a group with a few of the members here as well. It's called Reading the Law of One. We meet at Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And we meet once a week and read a session and just go through it and discuss, and to help us all deepen our understanding of the raw material and the law of one. And they're pretty fun. All are welcome to join. The Facebook group, you can find it, Reading the Law of One. Thank you.
It's a great group. Always a joy to sit in with you too. Let's see. I am looking in the chat window, and Ellie, have you found?
I'm here.
Oh, good.
I lost you, but I couldn't find the thing. I was lost, but I'm back. Thank you so much. So nice to meet you, Jim. Wow.
Glad to meet you, Ellie.
I'm a long time wanderer, and I recently found the Law of One, and you and Carla and Don and everyone and Jonathan. So my first question is, what is the essential first book that you would suggest?
Oh, I don't know if that's really possible. People have different needs. One of the words that Ra used so many times was unique, and how people are each unique. I can tell you my favorite first book that I read was the Autobiography of a Yogi. I read that back in 1972, and I've read it a couple times since because it's just so inspiring. Gosh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I meant your books.
Which one of our books?
Yes.
Oh.
I've read the Autobiography of a Yogi.
Okay. Well, again, Carla wrote a book to try to make the principles of the Law of One more accessible to people. And that was Living the Law of One 101, The Choice. And she had 12 chapters in there in which she discussed the basic principles that go into activating our various energy centers and how we can become more aware of our own spiritual journeys and partake in them consciously, so that eventually we make the choice, hopefully, to be of service to others. That's what we're all here for. And if we can make that choice, then we can make the graduation or the harvest into the fourth density of love and understanding. So that's the basic purpose of this third density, apparently, according to Ra. So I would probably suggest that for sure, because it gives you a good background into what Ra has to say. And sometimes people, if they start off right away with the Law of One, it's a bit overwhelming because Ra's their vocabulary is quite extensive. Their sentence structure is sometimes complex, and the concepts they're talking about are sometimes complex. So that's why she wrote it, to try to make this information a little more available to people. So I would suggest that.
That's the law of one, basic
Law of One, 101,
101,
the choice.
the choice.
I think
I'm on
the
it.
full title is Living the Law of
Living
One.
law, right.
Yeah, 101, the choice. And as with all the other books from L&L Research, it's available at the L&L Research website. If you go to their library, I believe you can get it.
Amazon too.
Oh, yeah.
I was reading Carla's book, The Wanderer, on Kindle.
Right, right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ellie.
Probably worth noting, Jim, that you are any updates on the 102 and 103 books? I believe we're in the editing process.
Well, they're on the back burner right now because there've been so many things, good things going on at L&L Research. You know, we had our new website that was debuted last August, but there's been some refinements that had to be made to make it more searchable. So that took some time that Gary and Austin had to devote there. And then after that, we had a new hire. We're going through the process of, we asked people to send in their resumes for a new position at L&L Research. So we got 35 resumes and really good ones. So Gary and Austin had to spend a lot of time going through those to find the best, to be sure that everybody met the requirements that we had. And then after that, they were down to the final 4 and then 2-hour interviews. So that finally concluded about 2 weeks ago. So shortly, they should be back doing the editing on 102. Eventually, we'll get that done. But there's so much good things going on here that just can't do everything at once.
No, and we trust that it will happen when it's meant to happen. And
Right, right.
all will be well. And all is well. Shayla had a question in the chat window, and she was asking, Jonathan, you did have a question about archetypes that we did get to answer last time. And she's just wondering what the question is. I was going to ask a lot of detailed questions about the archetypes of the mind and the archetypes of the body and the spirit, and talk about all of those cards to some extent. But I think came to realize that as Jim, I think you have said a number of times, we really got a lot of information about the archetypes of the mind, not that much about the body and spirit, meaning there's really not a whole lot we could say that wouldn't really be a whole lot of guesswork. But maybe just to honor the question, just in general about archetypes, Jim, did you have any thoughts to share about maybe the archetypes of the mind, or why people who are not necessarily adepts or wanting to be adepts would or should care about the archetypes or the Egyptian tarot?
Well, the archetypes, Ra developed the tarot, the major arcana of the tarot, to describe what they discovered in their third density experience on Venus to be the nature of the evolution of the mind, body, and spirit. Now, everybody knows that that's why we're here and what we're trying to do. And everybody seems to have their own way of pursuing that, which is, probably effective for each person. But they wanted to give people a basic understanding of how this all works, the nature of this experience. So in each of the designations of mind, of body, and spirit, there are 7 different subdivisions that give you an idea of how this all comes about. So in the first 7, the mind, the first one is the matrix of the mind. They call that the magician, or the conscious mind. So the conscious mind is separated from the unconscious by this veil of forgetting, which makes it challenging for us to discover spiritual principles and continue on our spiritual evolution. But if we can discover them, then that polarizes our consciousness much more effectively. And what happens then is that the unconscious mind is the high priestess, card number 2, the potentiator of the mind. And the unconscious mind, the high priestess, has all of this information about how the process of evolution works. Also has all of our pre-incarnative choices in it, so that it can bias the way we look at what happens to us on a daily basis and be more likely to process the catalyst of the mind, which is card number 3, the Empress, in a way that teaches us something about ourselves, gives us a broader view of ourselves. Anything that is either removed positively or negatively from the center of love. The center of love is where we begin. And anything that takes us off that center needs to be looked at, whether in the positive or the negative sense, so that we can see that we are all these things. We are the positive and the negative types of things. We are the creator. Eventually, the kind of equation Ra gave us was know the self through all this catalyst you get, accept yourself, and then become the creator. So the catalyst, once it's processed, then becomes experience. The experience of the mind is card number 4, and that's the Emperor. And all of our experiences then can be processed and stored in that category or that card, number 4. Now, also, all of that interaction between those first 4 archetypes, the number 1, 2, 3, and 4, the matrix, the potentiator, the catalyst, and the experience, becomes the significator, our significant self, that self that we have discovered through all of our incarnations over all of the period of time we have been on Earth, and for those wanderers before. So that significant self becomes important because it is our the heart of ourself. And then card number 6, the lovers, or the 2 paths, becomes a transformation of the mind. We transform our own mind by the choices we make and how we process the catalyst, how we store experience, and what is significant to ourselves. That choice or the transformation is the positive or the negative path, the lovers, the one way or the other. And then the great way of the mind is the card number 7. And that is the conqueror or the chariot. And the conqueror, the conquest that occurs throughout these first 7 cards is conquering the illusion of separation, so that we see that we are all things, we are all beings. So that's basically the way the mind works. We got a lot of information on that. And we got general information on the body and the spirit, because Don passed away before we got any further with that. That was at the very end of the raw contact. So that's basically how it works. It gives you the details. In each card, there are various portions of the card, different drawings and things, birds and right angles and stars and wands, and they all have meanings. And Ross said each person will decipher or decide for themselves exactly what that means within certain guidelines. Again, each person is unique. There isn't anybody else in the universe like you, but you can decide for yourself generally what each facet means. So we went through and we got what we felt was important for us in the first 7, and just general concepts for the rest, all the way 8 through 22.
Thank you for sharing that. They are fascinating study, and for anyone who hasn't seen the cards or the images, if you go to the L&L research website and go to the library and look at the Raw Contact Volume 2 in PDF form, if you go to the end of the sessions, there are all of the 22 cards and the images are there. And yeah, they are fascinating for sure. I know for myself, it's been said that 95% of our conscious thoughts are actually controlled by 95% of our lives are controlled by our unconscious thoughts. And I think, to me, it seems that's so much what understanding the archetypes is about, is diving beneath the surface of the ocean to see everything beneath. Shayla, did you have any follow-up questions about archetypes? Was there anything you wanted to ask? If you do, you can feel free to unmute your mic and ask.
I mean, I'm very thankful that Jim explained nicely the concepts. Do you, just maybe one, have you thought about following this line of questioning with Quo about other like body and spirit themes?
That's a good question. No, we haven't thought of that.
Really?
Really. When we have Quo sessions, we usually take readers' questions, but it would be something that we could think about. So thank you for your thought.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Great questions as always, Shayla. Thank you. I'm looking in the chat window and I'm seeing Sue Wen has a question. Sue Wen, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Jim. I just want to ask a little more about your workings during raw contact. After each session, do you three look at the answers together, then decide what to ask next, or is it mainly Don decide what he wants to ask next?
We did look at the previous session each time and try to figure out questions we wanted to ask. But frequently what would happen, well, two things would happen. Frequently Don would get questions in the meditation we had before the raw contact, and he would feel those were important to ask because they came to him during the meditation. Then the other thing that would happen is that frequently Ra would give us an answer to one of the questions we had devised the night before that was so interesting that Don just had to follow the trail for a while, and it would lead him away from the questions that we thought we were going to ask. So eventually, though, I believe that we did get almost all the questions asked that we wanted to ask, but they weren't always in the order that we thought they were going to be, because there are things that would happen that would be inspiring and we want to follow what Ra said.
Thank you. Also, many times Ra would say, I cannot answer this without the intervening material. So how do you go about to finding what the intervening material is?
Well, that was pretty tricky. We didn't always know how to do that because I've looked at some of those questions in the, recently and wondering myself, well, what was it that was missing? Because it seems to me that the question that came before this was the appropriate question. So Rod, they were looking out for our welfare when they said that, because they knew that they had to be able to give us information that was also based upon what we already knew. Otherwise, things wouldn't fit together. But it wasn't easy to figure out where the intervening material was. Sometimes Don would say, well, just let me ask the question this way. And he would change the wording a little bit, and then Ra would answer. So it was a mystery, and we didn't always solve the mystery.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Did you have more follow-up questions, Sue?
Just a quick one. So I assume after the session, you're the one who transcribed all the recordings?
Right.
And
I was scribe, so that was my job. And fortunately, Ross spoke slowly enough that it was just about the same speed that I could type. So it was perfect.
So you usually do that right after the session? Or?
Oh, yeah. There wasn't any delay. And Don was out in the hall pacing back and forth, waiting for the next page to come out of the typewriter.
Wow.
That was
amazing.
amazing.
Typewriters in those days, there weren't computers.
Such a beautiful, dedicated service. And Jim, am I remembering correctly that you were in meditation during the sessions?
Right. When the session was going on, I was attempting to visualize white light entering Carla's violet ray chakra, going all the way through her chakras down to the base red, and circling back. It was my intention to help the raw contact come through in that manner. And I started doing that on my own. And then somewhere around, I guess it was session 76, after we'd done a full year, Ra suggested that that type of a visualization would be helpful. So I'm glad I got it right to start with.
That's beautiful. And over the course of those 106 sessions, I know the frequency varied, but on average, if it's possible to say, would you be able to say on average how many times a week or month you were having those sessions?
We were a little over eager to start with. For the first month, I think we had at least one session a day, and occasionally we had 2 sessions a day. And later on, we figured out that that was overworking Carla, and we probably should have slowed down. We did eventually slow down to a more reasonable pace because there was a weariness factor that came from Carla serving as instrument. And I think we were making that worse, but we didn't know it at the time. I mean, this was just an amazing experience. And Don was just so eager to talk to Ra. He hadn't found anybody on the planet or anywhere else. There have been other sources, that start off with Hatan, 4th density, La Tui, 5th density, which he felt were very good, and he was glad to have them. But once he got into the Ra contact, Ra could answer any question that he asked if it didn't infringe upon free will. So he really did want to talk. So we had so many sessions. The first year, we had 75 sessions from January 15th to October 31st. We had to stop because Carla needed to have surgery on her right elbow. So we had to take 4 months off and get started again. The second year, we had, I think it was 21 sessions. And then the third year, we just had 4 or 5. So it slowed down quite a bit. Toward the end, it was difficult because Don and Carla were both having problems staying in good shape for the Ra contact. But that first year, we were off and running. We just kind of overdid it, I think.
Oh, who could blame you? I mean, to have that opportunity, to have that kind of contact with that sort of entity and be able to ask whatever you want. And this was 40 years ago too. Think of everything that we, for lack of a better word, understand now that we didn't 40 years ago. I was only asking because I was kind of reflecting back to the question that Ragnar was asking at the top of the session. And probably important to remember that, yeah, there's a big difference between having the quo channeling sessions now once, maybe twice a month as compared to the frequency, the Ra contacts. Probably affects the kind of questions that you want to ask when you have that time, I'm guessing. Let's see. I see Darby has a question in the chat window, and you've been waiting very patiently this whole time, Darby. Would you like?
Oh, thank you.
Would you like?
No patience required. Hi, Jim. Nice
Hey,
to
Darby.
meet you. Long-time reader, first-time caller. My question is, I'll just read my question because I took some time to chat it out. The raw material contains terms and concepts that relate to terms and concepts found in Western mystery / magical groups like the Golden Dawn, for instance. And I'm wondering if you, Don, and Carla were actively exploring these concepts before the Ra contact started. What I'm getting at is I'm curious if Ra used these types of terms in the Ra contact because you guys were already familiar with them through books or whatever the case might be. I'm talking about terms like adept or white magician, that kind of thing.
Don had been investigating white ceremonial magic for years. I don't know how many years before the Ra contact. And I believe that he had made quite a bit of progress in the area of the Golden Dawn. In fact, he mentioned one time, he asked what this experience was that he had when he, in meditation, he seemed to move to another planet, and it seemed to be gold. And Ra suggested it was an initiation of the nature of the Golden Dawn. So we did not practice anything other than the banishing ritual of a lesser pentagram in the magical sense. We did that together, and that was a way of purifying the room and protecting it so that no types of negative entities could enter the circle while we were having the contact with Ra. We used it in both the meditation room in the living room before we went into the Ra room, and we used it in the Ra room as well. So that was the extent of any type of white magic we did together. Ra was suggesting, though, that it would be a good idea if we did more of the practice of white magic, because that would provide more of a protection for Carla as she was serving as the instrument. Ra also gave us the walking of the circle of one that we did before every session with Ra, and that was another magical protection. But they suggested that if we, as a group, entered into more work with white ceremonial magic, that would be very helpful for us. And we had hoped to do that, but that was toward the end of the Raw contact that suggestion was made. And Don did begin, I believe, in session 74, asking more questions about the concept of magic. So we had started on that, but we didn't get too far with it. We, as I said, we had to deal with other things toward the end of the contact. Don and Carla are both having difficulties physically and sometimes mentally for Don before we were able to get too far with the magic.
Have you, I'm just curious, did you or Carla ever feel drawn to explore this white ceremonial magic after the contact ended as a way to, I don't know, more fully enable your adepthood or polarize or anything like that?
We didn't go any further than the banishing ritual of the lesser pentagram. We did that every day, and I still do it every day.
Okay.
So that we felt was the most important thing that we could do, because that would purify and protect the place where we did our meditations and our channelings.
So you do that when in the area you guys do the quote channeling?
Right.
Okay.
In the living room here where I am now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question, Darby. Thank you for asking. It's probably also worth noting, I have looked at the Golden Dawn book by Israel. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I believe the square breathing technique that you mentioned to us a few sessions back, Jim, that came to you through Carla, is actually taught as a practice of white magic also. So just doing that square breathing technique can help with your meditation and perhaps some small level of adepthood if one wants to. Jim, while we're on the subject, I'm remembering there was a question that was sent in by email a while back, sort of on the subject, by Martucella in one of the Law of One Facebook groups. And Martu said, could you ask Jim about the fire exercise and why Ra want to maintain it a secret? The exercise of fire, I assume, is what they're referring to. Is that something you can comment on?
Right. Well, there were exercises that Ra gave to us that could be published. And we published those in sessions 4, 5, and 6. Along with those, they also gave some exercises. One of them was the exercise of fire, that they suggested that we not share with others unless we had a close communication with them and could determine that they were going along the lines of the healer. Those exercises were given for people who wanted to be healers. And so in general, they suggested that we should not share them unless we were in close communication with somebody who really wanted those exercises in order to become a healer. So that's what we've done over the years. If somebody writes into Elno Research and says, well, I would like to see those exercises, then we engage in a conversation that usually takes, we suggest that they practice what's given in the book already in sessions 4, 5, and 6, practice that for 6 months, and then get back in touch with me, and I carry on a conversation. And so far, there's just been a handful of people who have done that, and we've given those exercises to those people. And it may be at some point, as Ross said, I think it was in question 76, Carla asked if there was some time in the future that those exercises could be made public. And Ross said, at some point, this shall be appropriate. So that may occur.
Thank you. Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. I'm seeing another question in the chat window from Aurea. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your word. Aurea Lee, would you like to unmute your mic and ask?
Yeah, nice to meet you. It's just like a small question. I read a reference to a ball of lightning experience that Dawn and Carla had, and they asked Raw about it. And Raw basically said that it was like a visit from them, wishing them well. I'm just curious, like what that experience actually was, if you know.
Well, when Carla was a baby, she was in her crib next to a window which was open, and there was a storm going on outside, and her mother was right next to her, and there was a little ball of lightning, maybe the size of a baseball, but it was lightning that came in and went around her crib 2.5 times and went back out the window. And apparently Dawn had a similar experience when Dawn and Carla discovered they both had that experience, and Dawn asked Raw about it. And Raw suggested that they were being greeted by their, I guess their social member complex was saying hello. And what an interesting way to say hello.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, wow. What a fascinating story. What a beautiful thing. That looks to me like the end of the first round of questions in the chat window. We're getting near the end of our hour, but we still have a bit of time. So I would encourage anyone who still has questions that they'd like to ask to go ahead, add them to the chat window. Otherwise, Josh, I would love to double back to you and see if you have another question or two that you would like to ask.
I think Ellie asked one that we didn't go over. Ellie, I'll love this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
Hey,
sorry.
thank you, Josh. I wanted to know, Jim, I wanted to know if it's possible to pass this sexual energy in a Reiki-like way. It doesn't have to be through intercourse, right? Is the sexual energy just that you were talking about?
I do not know. I would imagine, I don't know how Reiki works. I know that people can use it at a distance. And probably a Reiki person would have more information about that than I do. So I'm sorry, I really don't know.
Well, I am a healer.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I'm a massage therapist.
Okay.
And I feel that through touching and just being in the presence of a person, I feel that one doesn't have to go through intercourse. I think that's kind of animalistic. Like there's and as you get older, I think we're more sensitive and more vulnerable. So, and it says that our vulnerability is what makes us brave and able to transcend.
You could be right. That sounds like a possibility to me.
It says so in the meditation that that I got from Carla.
Okay.
It said once you're vulnerable enough, you're ready to when you have become vulnerable, then you're ready to ascend, to take the risk.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I was just wanting some confirmation.
Well, what you say sounds right to me, but since I don't have that experience, I can't say that's the way it is. I'll trust you.
Thank you. I can't wait to meet you in person.
That would be great.
Yeah, at a retreat.
All right. Maybe that'll happen one day.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ellie.
And if Carla said it, then yeah, it's probably probably good. Jim, if I remember correctly, yeah, Rod did mention there's many different forms of energy transfer, possibly infinite. I'm trying to remember the passage I read because it might have been one that you were mentioning. And
oh yeah, well, you're right, and that would lend credence to what Ellie just said. They said that the speaker and the teacher and the pupil, there's an energy transfer there, and the speaker and the audience, there's a transfer there. So why not Reiki too?
Indeed. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking, Ellie. Josh, did you have another question or two that you would like to ask in our remaining time?
Oh yeah, thank you. If possible, I do have two.
Go for it.
Can't tell which one is more important, but I guess I'll just start with the first one. I'm familiar. I've read a lot of material about Saint Germain and the violet fire and the I am presence. That's a lot of the concepts he talks about. A lot of stuff is from Mount Shasta region. I'm curious. I've searched extensively with the, all the conscious channeling and the raw materials. Never mentioned. Is L&L familiar with his teachings? He's supposedly an ascended master.
I'm not personally familiar with them. I'm not sure about Gary or Austin. They may be, or Trish. They may be familiar with it. I've heard the name so many times over the years. I know that it's a well-respected name in philosophy, but I just have not investigated it myself.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I'll submit that if we could ask Quo. Be interested. Yeah. And the other one was, I just finished reading a book. I don't know how many of you have heard or read, called Children of the Law of One by John Peniel. And it relates to Atlantis, and there's a group that from that time that passed on their knowledge over the years till modern times, supposedly. And would like to know if there's been any interaction with that organization, the Children of the Law of One, and L&L Research. And have you read the book? And if so, what are your thoughts on it?
I have not read the book. Once again, I'm sorry I haven't read it, and I do not believe there has been any contact. But if I don't see why there shouldn't be. It sounds like something that would be a good idea.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Of course, it's along the lines of Law of One, and actually in the beginning, they acknowledge and say, we're familiar with the raw contact, but this is not related at all. Oh. Material, but fascinating, and yeah, I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great question, Josh. Thanks for asking. I have read the book, and it is a great book, and I believe Morris has read the book also. And yeah, we both agreed it confirms a lot of what Ra said about Atlantis. Don't recall seeing anything in there that particularly conflicts. And I believe this was a person that Edgar Casey also had mentioned on a couple occasions as a significant figure in bringing some great spiritual truths to humanity. So definitely a book would recommend for anyone who wants to read something outside of the raw material, the raw contact. I do see one more question from Darby. Would you like to ask your question, Darby?
Sure. You may get this question a lot. I'm just curious if in present day with LL Research as it's currently configured, if your group is open to continuing to do channeling sessions with Ra if the proper configurations were met and Ra initiated contact. Just curious. I would think that might naturally come up in one's thought over the years. It certainly has come up in my thoughts. Like, man, wouldn't it be great to continue the conversation and continue to get more information about the archetypes and so on and so forth. And I don't imagine the door is closed to anyone. And I imagine there could be some difficulties in the present day now. The Law of One work is more known and more popular as far as what people do with that information, how they put Ra, do they put Ra on a pedestal and that kind of thing. But yeah, I was just curious your thoughts on that.
Well, while Carla was alive, people asked her that question, and she found information in the raw contact where Ra suggested that we should not try to have any contact with them without Don, Carla, and I being together. So that suggested to her that it would not be a good idea to give that a try. The raw contact happened by itself because the time was right. And I have a hunch again, if the time is ever right, that it would happen. We have a channeling group here that's been going since 2016. So they're all getting quite good. And you can see there, if you go onto our new website, it's the channeling circle. That it's a intermediate. It's called the Intermediate Channeling Circle. And I think that when we're able to get back to public meditations, which we hope to do this fall, that each will come here and they all channel here, and people will be able to ask them questions. And I think they'll be very pleased with the types of responses they get.
I'm not familiar with that meditation. Channeling circle intermediate. Is that something?
Yeah, if you go to our website, it's an intermediate channeling circle that you could look at for the transcripts. We used to be just the channeling circle. So we find they finally agreed with me that they were getting better and that we should change the name. So it's now intermediate. But I think they're better than that.
Right. So as a follow-up to that, if I may, if one wants to learn channeling and the method that LL Research has engaged in, I know in the past, I believe I've seen that channeling classes have been offered, but if one isn't, so is that still one way that's offered or might be offered in the future to do some type of class?
Well, the problem with what we've been able to do with the group we have now is they all are in this area. They live here. And so it's easy for them to get here. Now, if we offered channeling for people who did not live here, then they would have to travel all the way here for the sessions and then go back to their own homes. And if they didn't have at least 2 other people to channel with, you can't channel by yourself. You need at least 3 people. That's the minimum.
Okay.
So then if they didn't have a group to go back to, it would be very hard to do any channeling. So it's never really been a possibility, unfortunately.
One more follow-up question. If one were to create a group in a different local area, a group of people that were of similar desire to learn channeling, I'm supposing that group could come out and work with the LL Research and then go back and continue their studies.
Well, in theory, you could, except in practice, it takes such a long time to develop the ability to channel and to do it well that it would be so much travel. I mean, like I said, this group's been going since 2016.
Okay.
And it took a good 3 years before they had reached any kind of level where they might have been able to function on their own.
Okay, so there's lots of supervision that is needed before a group.
There needs to be a senior channel in each group that knows how it all works. It's an involved process. We used in this process we've got now in the group now, Carla had a channeling outline that she shared with people in February of 2008. And this was the basic information about how to do it. And that's what we used. And so any group that wanted to channel, we would try to do what we could. But again, like I say, it just takes so long to learn everything that's in that outline that it's just practically hard to imagine how to do it. So much travel, so much time.
Okay.
For folks who are not familiar with the entity known as Quo and Quo's relationship to Ra, if I remember correctly, LNO Research has had over 1,600 channeling sessions with Quo, going back to, I don't even remember when. Can you give a quick refresher for folks on who Quo is and the relationship between Quo and Ra?
The Ra contact ended in 1984. 2 years later, in 1986, Carla began channeling an entity called Quo. And it took us a while to ask who they were. So when we finally asked who they were, they said that they were a principle of 3 planetary minds, 3 group consciousnesses. The first was Hatan, which was the very first group that Carla and Don began to channel in 1961 in the first experiments that Don had with channeling. And the second group is Latui of the 5th density. And they were the entities that were channeling through Carla from about 1984 until the Ra contact started. And they continued channeling through her after the Ra contact at the public channeling on Sunday nights. And then the third social memory complex is those of Ra in a step down fashion so that they are able to offer their inspiration without actually channeling through the person. So the voice of Quo is actually Latui, but they can call upon those of Hatan and those of Ra for the principles that they share in response to the questions they're asked.
Thank you. Yeah, really important thing I think to remember for folks who are wishing for more contact with Ra. And I've read many of those channeling sessions with Quo, and as Jim has mentioned, yes, they have a different communication style, but really profound, beautiful, poetic at times, very heartfelt, and learned so much from them for sure. So would highly recommend going to the channeling library at LNL Research to check out. Jim, we are about at the end of our time, and I just wanted to ask if you had any last thoughts, closing thoughts you'd like to share with folks before we part ways for this time.
Well, it's been another great session together with everybody. I thank you all for your questions. You know, these questions and answers supposedly are ways that we all learn. You know, Ra called us teach learners and learn teachers. You know, we both teach and we learn. And I learn from you and you learn from me. And together we are moving and helping each other go forward. And that's the whole idea, that those of like mind who together seek far more surely find. So you've helped me a great deal, and I hope I've helped you some too. And thank you for your love and light, and love you all. And be sure to share your light with the world, because it needs it very much now. And whatever love you put into the world, everyone will feel to some degree, because we are all brought together by the force of love.
Thank you. Love you very much too, my friend. Thank you so much for putting yourself out there. It's a big thing. Little bit of a risk coming out there and just fielding whatever questions happen to come up. So really appreciate it. Learn a lot. I always love going back and listening to these again. And I always learn more when I watch it again. So thank you so much for sharing your time and presence with us today. Thank you for all you do in service to others. Blessings to you, to all our friends at LNL Research. Blessings to all who are joining us on Zoom today, and blessings to all who are watching this at some other time and space. Blessings to all. Adonai. Namaste.
Adonai. Be well.
Love you.
Love you.